The 550th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony back with you here on a Monday. It's actually been a week since we last time recorded a basketball edition of the pod. I would say that it was a week off, but that was not the case with all the transfer portal news on the football side of things. And Carolina got a surprise transfer portal entry today with the twist that we'll talk about here in just a moment. Before we do that, though, we'll do the pod thought of the day. And we go to Selma Stockdale for today's pod thought. And that thought is, quote, "We may think that our decisions are guided purely by logic and rationality, but our emotions always play a role in our good decision-making process," end quote. As you guys know, if you've been a long-time listener to the show, I try to find a pod thought that relates to whatever we're talking about on that edition of the podcast, whether it's during the season or like in this edition, we're here in the offseason. Ven-Allen Lubin effectively made a business decision when he decided to enter his name in the transfer portal earlier this afternoon. I got alerted at about 11:15, 11:30 that news was expected, and by 12:15, by 12:30, that news was broke. But what was not broken or told initially in the reporting was that Ven-Allen Lubin expected to stay in the portal but return to Carolina, with a certain twist. And with that, he tweeted out, quote, "Before anybody jumps to the wrong conclusion, I am letting everyone know that I'm entering the transfer portal with the full intent of returning to UNC. My action relates to the complexities surrounding the possible approval of the NCAA settlement." Now, of course, if you follow college athletics, college football, college basketball, this settlement's been something we've been referencing a lot because it's going to impact how you build your rosters, both football and basketball moving forward, because it has to deal with revenue sharing. And then conferences are required to spend, $20.1 million, $20.2 million of revenue back on the teams that they are fielding. And we expect that money to be primarily used for football and basketball. Certain schools, maybe women's basketball, baseball, whatever. We've never, though, seen a player reference that when regarding to enter the transfer portal. And so when you look at Ven-Allen Lubin's decision, because at the time that we get alerted, we're sitting here thinking, okay, what happened? Who came up with the bag? Why did Carolina not meet the bag? That's apparently not what the case is. Basically, this is him saying, as long as this settlement gets passed and that extra money becomes available to me, I'll be back in Chapel Hill for my senior season.
it feels like ultimately what happened was that they just got capped out, and they're kind of just waiting on the house settlement to come through to give them that little bit of extra money that they need to be able to keep him in place. I think that it's good that it shows you that he is okay with whatever role Carolina is sort of promoting to him that he is going to be in, whether that's, coming off the bench, potentially being a starter to begin the year at the 4 spot and playing, out of that 5 position that he has been playing for most of his career when Henry Vasar will be starting there. So, I think it's a weird situation because typically when you see guys enter the portal, even if they're thinking about returning, they don't really let you know it. This is basically, if we get the money, then it's going to happen. I'm coming back, but you have to get me the money. And so I think, one of the things that you were saying sort of, as we were preparing for this was that he's getting similar money to last year. I would imagine that he is wanting a little bit more money to be able to stay. And I think that's probably where the house settlement sort of comes in. They've probably told him, look, as of right now, we want to keep you. We want to keep you at basically all costs. But the thing is that we've got to sort of know where we're at in terms of the NIL collective money that we have. And so right now we're going to offer you what we offered you last year, but we're hoping that we can get you up to a certain number. That's what it feels like to me. But yeah, I mean, it certainly is one of the weirder things that we've seen during the transfer portal era is a guy entering the transfer portal and basically saying, I will definitely be back. It's just a matter of if the money is actually there for me to be able to return.
Yeah, and that report about the financial commitment, I think it was Cheryl McMillan of Inside Carolina had that report. And Keith Haynes commented here on Facebook, revenue share had nothing to do with it. Carolina offered him the same salary as he was making last year, and he thought he was worth more. Yeah, Heath, I appreciate you listening and tuning in and commenting. That's frankly just incorrect because he simply he flat out referred to that settlement, which has to do with revenue sharing, which has to do with more money being made available to him. I think, two things about Lubin. A, he said it way back when you go back to the night Carolina got beaten Ole Miss. Him and Seth Trimble both said, we want to be back here, but it has to make sense financially. And that's where we are, folks. When we look at college athletes, when you look at whether it's football, whether it's basketball, look at Denzel Aberdeen, a role player for Florida's national championship winning team, just got $2 million to go to Kentucky. Could have been the face of Florida's potential defending title team, but Florida, I would imagine, not having the money that Kentucky has, I've got a ring. Well, let me go get my bag. That's where we are right now, where a lot of this stuff is now transactional. And Carolina, I think getting close to last year was a starting point. But for a guy that was super important down the stretch, you look at his last 11 games, he averaged over 13 points, over 7 rebounds, shot 67% from the field, and 84% from the foul line. I could see why Ven-Allen Lubin wants to demand more money and could be in demand of more money. And so, you're right. This is quite frankly the first time we've seen a player openly refer to money in this type of way. I do wonder what type of precedent this might set moving forward. Heck, before tomorrow night, like the deadline is tomorrow night, 11:59 is the deadline for players into the portal. You got to wonder, guys around the country, if they're going to maybe pull the same thing and say, oh, okay, well, I can maybe get more money, but we need this settlement to come through. I'm going to enter my name in the portal now and pull it out. I do think it's a good sign, at least from the initial intel and all the initial reporting, is this has nothing to do with Henry Vasar and Jared Stevenson being brought into the program. Yep. Because if that was what was fueling this, then I don't think there would be this desire to return to Carolina. Like this is simply a financial decision. And I think, and I don't want to blame it all on Lubin, but I think this is a clear example why we need regulation. Because Hubert Davis, Jim Tanner, and this staff, they have operated since March 18th or whatever Carolina got beat all the way up until today with the assumption that he was going to be back on the roster. They secured a financial deal early in the offseason to kind of recruit and build the roster the rest of the offseason with him in mind. But on the eve of the transfer portal, because these things are not, they're not contracts and they're not binded to them, kids can enter the portal at the last minute. And I think there's just so much chaos and why there is a need for regulation. I'm not against these guys making money. I'm not against these guys demanding the money they want to demand. College athletics is a billion-dollar industry. College basketball the tournament alone, its revenue is over $1 billion. The guys that are making that revenue possible deserve to get a cut of the pie. With that being said, you've got guidelines and rules and regulations in pro sports. We need it now at the college level more than ever.
Yeah, I mean, no one's arguing that. I think at this point we all kind of know that this has to be regulated in some way, because if it's not, then it's just going to continue to get out of control, and you're going to start seeing more and more things like this where guys just enter the transfer portal out of nowhere despite signing contracts. Now, I don't think this is the greatest example of that. I don't know if he had already signed that contract. I don't think he did. But, in terms of some of the other things we're seeing, I mean, we've seen it multiple times with football. I'd imagine it's happened with basketball, guys saying that they're going to not only commit, but that they're going to sign with a certain program and then choose to go elsewhere. Carolina had that on the football side of things. That's where you need the regulation. I think with this is, I'm not trying to put too much on the staff here, but you always have to prepare for the unexpected when it comes to the portal. Like James Conley just said it right now on Facebook. It's the Wild West. You've got to know that at any moment there is a possibility that a guy can enter the transfer portal on you. And this is one that, because he hadn't signed a contract yet, I think Carolina, hopefully had some sort of other plan. That might be part of the reason why they reached out to the big man transfer from the College of Charleston. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why they did that. And so I think that's the thing. And here's the good news. If Carolina does end up losing him to the portal, if they can't end up paying him, there are plenty of options to go out and fill his shoes. Now, are they going to be nearly as good as he was? Maybe not, because the way that he was playing at the end of the season was an all-conference type level. I don't know if you're going to get that same type of player out of the portal, but there are plenty of guys you can go and get, because as we've seen with this portal era, and another reason why they need regulation is there are a lot of guys that are getting stuck in the portal. One of them is a guy that we've talked about at length, Nick Dorn. That's a guy that more than likely he ain't going to play this year, because unless he's willing to come down on his price, there's nobody that's really linked to him at this point. So I think, that's the thing about Carolina, man, is that they still are in an advantageous position. If Jaden High is returning to the roster, that could be a guy that could help fill the shoes of Ven-Allen Lubin if needed. James Brown, you could kind of combine those two to play the minutes he was going to play. But that's a less than ideal situation. The ideal situation is that this settlement goes through, which I would be stunned if it doesn't. When was the last time that the NCAA has actually won in court? It has not happened as long as I can remember. Especially during this stretch. So I would be stunned if the NCAA actually gets it done. I think that you will see the revenue share come down, and Carolina should be in a good spot. But yeah, it's understandable why some people may be feeling a little concerned that you could be losing one of the pieces that was playing at his best towards the end of last season.
Yeah, look, Myron Goodman, a guy that listens and follows us here, on the podcast as well at the station. Like, he popped in my DMs immediately and wanted to blame Hubert and the staff for this. I find it hard to believe that they're at much to blame. And look, I know I am, Hubert's a personal defense attorney. That's what I'm going to be doing all summer long, is defending the job that he's done so far, and the job I think he's going to do in the years to come. But I have to imagine that when they were bringing in Visar and Jared Stevenson, he was being told about it, and I guess was probably clued in financially. This is this is where the thing we talked about with the Jaron Stevenson thing, this is where this is the biggest issue or the biggest positive, is that even if for some whatever reason Ven-Allen Lubin exits the program and does not come back, Carolina has front court depth. That's where you can manage this loss. I don't like it because the way that Ven-Allen Lubin played down the stretch, those the last 11 games, those numbers I referenced to you, that was the Ven-Allen Lubin I told you we were getting back in the summer when we landed him, and you and I were arguing about him. But, like, he finally down the stretch looked like the guy I thought he was capable of looking like, and I do think whether he's starting coming off the roll or coming off the bench this year would play a significant role in what success Carolina hopes to have the upcoming season. But if he's not back, you've got Visar, you've got Jaron Stevenson. All signs point towards Jaden High coming back. And then, we were both high on James Brown because of just the energy that he played with. There's a motor there that even if he's not as gifted as Lubin, he'll make up for how hard he plays. I do think what's kind of unclear is we don't know what Carolina is thinking as of right now in terms of adding to the roster because they had more scholarships to fill. You got 15 scholarships now. We went a whole week, and after we talked about Jaron Stevenson becoming a Tar Heel, I mean, when I tell you there was no news outside of, Carolina checked in on Andre Stojakovic. He was not interested in Carolina. Like, outside of that, it was pretty mum, which would lead you to believe.
Well, because the Simeon Wilcher stuff, that's not true. I want people to know because they were questioning that. Somebody actually messaged me too. That's not a true story. Carolina's not in on him as far as I know.
No, they're not. Which would lead you to believe that Carolina was waiting for a decision on Drake Powell, but for all intents and purposes was probably done portaling for the offseason. And nothing wrong with that because you brought in, a talented core of guys, and I think you're going to help this team in more ways than one win at the level we want to win at next season. I do think Ven-Allen Lubin, though, if he doesn't come back, that does change Carolina's mindset. That does change Carolina's outlook. I think the question then becomes, do they add a prototypical big man to the roster, or do you go add another guard or another wing to help this team from the outside, maybe shoot the ball? Because we know Hubert Davis wanted to add as much shooting as possible to the roster this offseason.
Well, let me start by saying I want Ven-Allen Lubin back. For anybody that's questioning where I'm at on this because of last offseason, no, that was the guy at the end of the season that Josh thought that we were going to get, and that's where I'm at. I think that he is a legitimately good player that helps Carolina in a lot of ways, especially on the offensive end of the floor. What he did scoring-wise, what he did offensive rebounding-wise, there's few guys that can do that, especially at his size. So I think it's in Carolina's best interest to bring him back. Now, if they don't end up bringing him back, what would I do? Personally, I would go out and get a traditional big. I would go out and get Brevich, the guy that Carolina contacted out of Coastal College of Charleston. I think that honestly, that would probably make the most sense would be to go after someone of that size, because who's your backup to Henry Vesar? You don't have one. And that's the thing. Vesar's a guy that, I think he's going to play more minutes. There's no question about that. He played 20 minutes a game last year. So you're going to expect this guy to completely change and become a guy that plays 30 plus minutes a game? No, you're hoping that that's not the area that you have to go to. You want someone off the bench that's going to be able to help him. So I would go with the more traditional big, because I don't think, the way that James Brown plays, I mean, he's 6'9", he's the same height as Lubin. Ideally, that would be a guy that you're having on the floor with your big man. You're sort of running what we saw with a team like Florida, like Michigan State, like Michigan this past year, where you're running two bigs on the floor. Same thing with Jaden High, because we saw Jaden High was basically becoming a 4 last year during the offseason. He had been working on his outside shot, and a lot of the times when he was on the floor, it was either Lubin that was on the floor with him or Jalen Washington. It was very rare that you saw him at the 5 spot. So I think they would have to look for that traditional big, and there are some options out there. That's the good news for Carolina. Now, is there an option that's going to come in and absolutely dominate? I don't know about that, but I do think that you're going to find you would be able to find someone pretty solid. Hopefully that's the mindset that they would take towards it. Because I think, especially with Stevenson, I mean, I think you're trying to change how you're going to use him. But I do think that he is still going to be a guy that's going to be effective enough. And hopefully with less volume of shots from beyond the arc, the efficiency gets a little bit better for him. He's still going to be able to stretch the floor for you. Caleb Wilson's going to be able to stretch the floor for you. Same thing with a guy like Jaden High. I don't think you're going to be able to, I think it would make sense to find someone that's a big down low that can help you.
An interesting tidbit about the portal. Clemson's Ian Shefflin and Jaden Zachary, 2 starters from that team a year ago, they both just entered the portal about 10 minutes ago or so. I think those are 2 guys, and I know, Zachary is a wing. I think it'd be a great secondary ball handler behind Kai and Evans.
How does that have eligibility?
I don't know. At this rate, I think as long as you can just say that you played during COVID or you contracted COVID, they'll give you another year of college basketball. We saw Ian Shefflin, give us, a hand troubles, whether it was last year in Clemson, a few years ago in Chapel Hill. So maybe those are 2 guys that Carolina checks in on. I think the other question we have to ask is, what should Carolina do? Should they let Ven-Allen Lubin hold them hostage and hope this settlement that's been on the table now for 3 weeks, that's been referenced that this could come down at any point? Like, do they let that hold them hostage, or do they just say the heck with it and over recruit them and go find somebody else? I don't think Hubert Davis would do that. I really don't, because we know the man that he is. We know that that's not the way he wants to run his program. We also know he wants guys that want to be here and not because of the financial component as well. Now, you've made it clear you want Ven-Allen Lubin back. I most definitely want Ven-Allen Lubin back. I thought there was a guy that we found that those last 11 games, man, that I think, with no RJ Davis on the roster, a second year in the system, in the program, I think is ready to take a step vocally and be a leader. I thought there was some effort and some passion that he played with, that I think as he grew into being a Tar Heel, got to appreciate it more and more, that, okay, this isn't Vanderbilt, this isn't Notre Dame. Like, I'm at a place where this means something. And there are 22,000 there's 22,000 people in the stands every night watching me play. By God, I need to play my butt off for those people. But so I want him back. And I think you put him back in that front court, that quartet that Carolina has. That's as good a front court that Hubert Davis has had at Carolina, and it would be, I think, a top 3 front court in the ACC. So what do you think Carolina should do? Do you think they should play the waiting game? Is Ven-Allen Lubin the type of guy that you let kind of hold you hostage roster-wise, or do you think Carolina should say adios, amigo, and try to go find another player that can help this roster for 2025, 2026?
Yeah, I might say it a little bit of a different way than that. But, I mean, I just, to me, he's the best guy that's out there. I don't think you're finding somebody better than him. And maybe people disagree with that. Maybe even, a guy like Ian Shefflin. We've seen some moments where Ian Shefflin has looked really good. I'm going to tell you right now, Ian Shefflin is entering the transfer portal because Ian Shefflin wants to be a starter. And this role that Ven-Allen Lubin is going to be in, I'm not sure that guy is a starter this coming season. I don't know that. Now, Shefflin, maybe he's okay with coming off the bench if that means that he gets to play at Carolina. But I mean, that's you're asking a kid to go from being a full-time starter and one of the critical pieces on his team to being a guy that doesn't even start. Now, would still be a very critical piece. And I think, the way that he rebounds at his size is amazing. That's the type of effort that you're looking for. But you also get that rebounding from a guy like Ven-Allen Lubin. Those numbers, if he had been able to bottle what he did towards the end of the season and space that out over the entirety of the season, the numbers are probably pretty similar between those 2 players. So I think you could even make the argument that Ven-Allen Lubin is a lot closer to Ian Shefflin than some people are probably going to give him credit for. Holding a team hostage it seems strong, but I would believe that you should wait this out, because one, I don't think you have the money to go after a bigger name. Like, if you are waiting on the house settlement to be able to give Ven-Allen Lubin what he wants, where are you getting the money to pay a guy that may want more than him, which is what might be on the table if you have to go out there and find someone. There are other options that you could get on a budget. They're not going to be anywhere near as talented as he is. They're going to probably have some of the same issues that he had coming in last year. And you're going to have that. We're going to be having that debate over whether or not someone can contribute. And if they go, severe bargain, then we're talking about someone in the Tyson Claude type market, something like that. I don't think that's the solution. I think you want someone of Ven-Allen Lubin's talent, especially if he's saying, I am willing to come back. I just have to get the money. So to me, I would wait it out. And like I said, there's always going to be guys in the portal. There are so many guys that are trapped. I mean, we just talked about it on our show, the Wes and Walker show on WFNZ last week. 19% of the guys that are in the portal are committed, 81% uncommitted. So there are a ton of guys that are trapped. So you could eventually find your guy. So to me, I wouldn't say he's holding it hostage. I'd say we're choosing to wait it out. Oh.
All right, we back?
We are.
All right, so finish up your thought there.
Well, I don't know if people ended up hearing the end of my thought. You froze on my end, but really, I mean, I think he's the best thing that you can get. I think it's worth waiting out. And to me, it's not really you being held hostage. It's more of you guys, choosing to wait for what is the best option in the portal.
Yeah. I think he's a guy that you see this thing through. And the fact that, he tweeted out what he tweeted lets you know that he wants to be here. But there's got to be a financial component. I just look at a guy that had 20 games starting for Hubert Davis a year ago that played so well down the stretch. I don't want to lose on what could be a really big offseason for him and what could really help solidify this team as being a legitimate contender, a legitimate threat next year in the ACC. And then as you try to get back to being a national contender, a team that could, get a really good seed on Selection Sunday, and then at least make, I would say, the second weekend of the tournament. We dealt with this last year in a way where, RJ Davis waited until the very last day to announce if he was coming back or not. And that was a different situation because, he was coming off being the ACC Player of the Year, was an All-American, had one of the best guard seasons of all time. This is comparing apples to oranges, and I do get that. But I think Ven-Allen Lubin, if he's on your roster next year, is that really changes the outlook for you. If he goes somewhere else and you bring in a lower tier big, then I do think that Carolina's front court takes a hit. So, hopefully Hubert Davis, Jim Tanner, and this staff is patient. Hopefully they're faithful to the player, and hopefully in return that player is faithful to them in hopes that this settlement comes down sooner rather than later, and the additional financial resources that he wants, that he quite frankly deserves, will be made available to him to ensure he's back in Chapel Hill for 2025-2026. Moving on, we got two other things we want to talk about here really quickly before we get out of this edition of the podcast. We've been keeping you updated on all the guys as they found new homes that entered the portal for Carolina. Elliot Cadeau has landed at Michigan. Jalen Washington has landed at Vanderbilt. And earlier today, and no surprise, Ian Jackson officially goes to St. John's, He'll play for Rick Pitino, the defending Big East champions, next season. Now, of course, this is not a surprise because upon Pitino's hiring at St. John's, everyone and their mother expected a decommit from Carolina and for Ian Jackson to stay home and play for Rick Pitino last season, but that did not happen. He stayed committed to Carolina, had an up and down rookie season in Chapel Hill before jumping ship. What do you make of Ian Jackson going back home to play for a Hall of Fame coach in a program that returned to the national scene in a big way last year in the Big East?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. It's exactly what we thought was going to happen, was that he was going to go back home and play for Rick Pitino. The reason that it's interesting is because Rick Pitino is going to demand that you defend. And that's something that we saw, with a guy like RJ Lewis, who was the Big East Player of the Year, and he gets benched during the NCAA tournament because he's not defending. So you're going to need to see more consistency from Ian Jackson. You're going to see the effort hopefully go up for him. And here's the thing. I'm rooting for him to have success there. First of all, St. John's is one of those programs that just about everybody should be rooting for to have success. I mean, I get it if you don't like Rick Pitino, if you really don't, then it makes sense why you don't root for them. But for college basketball, I think that St. John's being good is good for the sport. I think they are an interesting program. It gets the city of New York invested in college basketball, as we saw this past year. And I think, for him to go home and play well for your home team, I think would be really cool. A kid that played in the Bronx, that would be really special for him. So I'm wishing him the best success. I think it has the potential to be the best fit out of the ones that the former Carolina players have went to, because it has, he's a guy that's probably going to start for them next season. And if he can become the player that we thought he was going to become, then St. John's can definitely have a lot of success. And they need someone that can be able to get them a bucket in clutch times. That's some of the issues that they had this year, even with a guy as good as RJ Lewis. They just didn't have enough shooting on that team. Ian Jackson has to shoot better than he did this year, but the potential for this to work is there. I see why it makes the most sense. And he's going to play for maybe the best coach in the sport right now, the best coach remaining in the sport right now in Rick Pitino. So, good for him, and we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, when he entered the portal, I'm not surprised. You could tell by the way that the season ended for him individually. He was moving on. You go back to that Clemson game, I was pretty critical of his effort and his body language, because I had never seen a player of his status pout on the basketball court the way that he did. And you go back and watch the game, he pouted. It's going to be interesting seeing him transition playing for a coach that is as demanding as any coach that there is in all of sport. Whether it's college or pro, there is not a coach that demands more than what Rick Pitino demands. And so I think it'll be a nice – I do think for his NBA career and his outlook, he'll be taught how to be a pro there because of what Rick Pitino requires and demands. As a kid that we saw light up the stage when Carolina played UCLA in the Garden, I think he will feed off of playing in the Garden. I think all but 2 games next year for St. John's are scheduled to be played in MSG under the bright lights on the big stage. So I think he'll be a kid that embraces that. And while I wasn't heartbroken that he left, like, what's so different is we root for these guys for the most part when they leave. There are certain circumstances where, when they leave, I don't really care if they go somewhere else and have success. That's not how I feel about this group. Like, I want Elliot Cadeau to thrive at Michigan. I want Jalen Washington to be a productive player at Vanderbilt. I want Ian Jackson to be a difference maker for St. John's. I hope Cade Tyson shoots the ball heck of a lot better wherever he lands. And it looks like Cade Tyson is going to stay at the power conference level from all the initial intel. So, for as critical as I was of Ian Jackson, I'll be rooting for him. The college basketball junkie that I am, I love St. John's. That's a program that when they're good, I get into them. I don't love Rick Pitino. I support St. John's Rick Pitino. And the Big East is a conference that I watch probably outside of the ACC and the SEC night in, night out. Like, I've always grown up loving the Big East, even though I'm an ACC guy. And so I think I'll watch a lot of his games next year. And just remember that, if Carolina's good and St. John's is good, come Selection Sunday, that'll be a storyline to watch come bracket time, like we saw with Carolina and Arizona. A chance to maybe have him face his former school. So we'll be interested to see how he transitions playing for Pitino, but we are rooting him the best of luck in his new basketball home. The last thing, there were some people, not a lot, but there was initial overreaction and fret when Caleb Wilson had a less than stellar outing in the McDonald's All-America game. Of course, that's the incoming 5-star freshman who's going to play a big role of Carolina this upcoming season. Well, the Jordan Brand Classic came and went over the weekend, and the kid responded in a major way, 28 points on 13 of 14 shooting. He is going to be, I think, really fun to watch. I don't know if there's been a freshman that has embraced Carolina from a recruiting standpoint more than he has since he committed. Like, he committed to Carolina when all things were down on Hubert Davis. He has had to deal with fans tweeting at him, basically telling him, hey, don't suck. We need you to be a really good player. And he has responded saying, I'm not going to suck. I'm going to deliver in a big way. In this past weekend, he was quoted saying that he wants to be a part of returning the program back to glory and, instilling that winning mentality and that competitive spirit that we're used to seeing from Carolina year in, year out. So was really happy to see him bounce back in a major way in one of these all-star games, because I do think he's showing up knowing what is expected of him. And I think he, as much as any of these recent freshmen Carolina has brought in, he seems primed and ready to deliver in a big way on and off the court for Hubert Davis.
Yeah, you should be feeling really confident because this game showed you his offensive game. The McDonald's All-American game, I mean, I tried telling people after the game was over that it was not time for you to completely panic, because you go back and you watch how he defended. I mean, he showed you that he is going to be a high-level defender, a guy that can defend anywhere from the 4 all the way to the 2, or, potentially even the 1 spot. Definitely a guy that showed a lot of potential in that area. And so when you combine these two performances, I think you should be incredibly excited about this young man. And I think I would be shocked if he does not start the year as a starter. We've said it before with other guys, but, with Ian Jackson, there was an RJ Davis in the way. This time around, who's in the way? Is it Ven-Allen Lubin? I think the thing is that ideally Caleb Wilson plays the way that Hubert Davis wants to play, which is a 4 that can shoot the ball from the outside. So I think he would probably get the nod there. So I definitely think this was the type of performance that he needed to just shut up any of the critics, which most of the critics are not coming from Carolina's side of things. They're coming from the Duke fans, the State fans that are wanting to see another freshman fail at Carolina. But I think this guy, he has a chance to succeed because he's got the right mindset going in, and that's the most important thing.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up this edition of the podcast. In the meantime, we're going to direct you to our website, HeelToughBlog.com. The Ven-Allen Lubin news can be found there. There was the initial article about him entering the portal that was then updated 30 minutes later about his decisions or his hope to remain with Carolina basketball for next season. So you can go and check that out. The Heels basketball wasn't the only program to land a transfer today. Bill Belichick struck again, landing a running back out of Michigan. A busy week or so for Bill Belichick and Carolina football. A lot of guys entering the portal, but Carolina very active in the spring window. And Anthony's been working around the clock to keep you up to date on all that news and information as best as he can. So we've been encouraging you to visit the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com every single morning, afternoon, and evening for your best Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football coverage. You can also follow us on social media at Heel Tough Blog on Twitter. Hit that notification button. That way you get notified every time an article goes live, whether it's in early in the morning, the middle of the afternoon, or sometimes even late in the evening. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform, simply search the Four Corners Podcast. It will pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball off season. With that, guys, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.